Martin O'Malley, running for the DNC chair position. You have so graciously agreed to be a part of our interview series for the candidates that are running for this DNC chair position.
Glad to. Honored. Thanks for reaching out.
Thanks for joining us. I guess, firstly, a brief background for yourself. A lot of the people that are listening are very much like online people. So we know who Trump is, we know who AOC is, and that's it. Yeah.
All right. So you want me to give my own background?
Well, I can introduce you. Former city councilman, mayor of Baltimore, governor. You were in the name of for all of the governors association.
Democratic Governors
Association.
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay,
you want me to do it? I'll give you my euphoria backstory. So I was born in a small log cabin outside of in the suburbs of Maryland. Moved to Baltimore for law school, stayed, was in the state's attorney's office for a couple years. But even before those days, I threw myself headlong when I was in college at Catholic University into the campaign of a little-known United States Senator named Gary Hart, who that year would be the candidate that emerged out of the pack and challenged Walter Mondale all the way to the nomination. And in the course of that experience, I was, I had the biggest title of any 20-year-old in my cohort. I was as the adults got laid off in the campaign, I became the deputy national finance director of the campaign, and then I acquired a lot of experience once he took off. They gave me a piece of Iowa to coordinate, and then did Oklahoma, Texas, Pennsylvania, 3 states on that the convention, Florida, Rhode Island, South Carolina, had coordinated the Sacramento area, and then I came back. The reason I share that is I learned in those times from people with a lot of experience how to run a campaign. And so it's not such a great leap for me. Also worked for Barbara Mikulski as her field director while I was going through law school. First woman ever elected in her own right to the United States Senate, which was a real also immersion experience in Baltimore. And then I ran for state senate at the age of 27. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, told me, this guy's going to beat you like a drum. You have no idea what you're walking into. I said, I think I can take him. So I knocked on a lot of doors, like 8,000 doors. They tell me I lost by 23 votes on the absentees. Next year, a seat opened on the city council, which I had not thought about doing, but my friends convinced me, and they were so elated we came so close, even though I was demoralized that I fell just short. And they said, that is service also, and the city needs good people. And so I ran and was elected and reelected there. Thought I was getting out of politics, and then no one emerged that year to run for mayor that could do what needed to be done to make our city a better and safer place. So I ran for mayor and was elected.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed
You don't have to ask real quick. I'm told we're here for like 2 hours.
2 hours? Oh, I was told I had 45 minutes, and then we were going to go to the back and schmoo. No. One thing there's 2 things that I really like about your story. Well, one question and then one thing I really like. One thing that I try to stress to my audience is politics seems very insulated from the rest of society, such that if you're not a Kennedy or a Clinton or rich, you can't be involved in any way.
Yeah, good question.
And yeah, it seems like there's a surprising amount of power, especially at local levels, if you're willing to just reach out and grab it. You mentioned that election that you lost by, now you said 20-some votes, I read 40-some votes, but it was
It was half of 43.
Half of, okay.
So I needed to switch that math.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay, politician math. No, I'm just kidding. But
electoral.
The electoral math. You decided to run for this relatively. You ran for office. You did it on local levels, and then you have worked your way up to being in these larger positions. How do you try to get the younger people involved when it comes to getting active in politics, when it feels like, I guess to reframe this a little bit, it feels like the focus is so much on the national level stuff that nobody knows their mayor, nobody knows their governor. Yeah. How do you get people to kind of be more fixated on being involved in some of these local matters?
Yeah, the last time we did this to ourselves in 2016, there was an outpouring of first-time candidates. Many of them were young, not all of them, but many of them were young. And I remember going to an event. It was sponsored, an organization. There were a lot of sudden sort of pop-up ad hoc organizations. And this one was all about bringing forward new leaders. It was some former Obama campaign folks. That's where I first met Lauren Underwood, actually, was at that event. But I shared that story I just shared with you about running for the first time because I think it underscores the truth that you don't have to come from money. You don't have to have, the so-called bosses in any city or the senior politicians tell you it's your time. I got news for you. They will never tell you it's your time. But nobody could stop me, and this is what I shared with Katie at the time. I said, no one's going to stop me from knocking on doors. And if I'm willing to go out there, if I'm willing to raise some money from my friends, kind of monetize the Christmas card list and the high school yearbook and raise the money, no one can stop me from knocking on doors and delivering my message and meeting people. And that is still true today.
Can I ask, as somebody that was going to law school, there's obviously a lot of lucrative careers available to you. And despite what people think, politics is not that lucrative in terms of payout. There's a lot of people working for very little money here, sometimes no money at all. What was it when you were young that drove you towards politics? Did you go into law school thinking, I want to be very politically active, or?
Yeah, I was lucky to be. I was raised in a home of two World War II generation people, Tom and Barbara O'Malley. Both my parents were aviators. My dad flew a B-24 33 missions over Japan, and my mom was in the Civil Air Patrol at the age of 17 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. But both of their parents had been deeply involved in party politics. My dad was the head of the party in the north side of Pittsburgh, and my mom's dad was the chair of the Allen County, Fort Wayne, Indiana party all through the Roosevelt years. So we were raised with those stories. We were always taught and encouraged to be involved in the political life of our place, our home place, our state, our country, and we were told that that was a noble calling. And whether to help other people running for office, which I initially thought was my great talent, and maybe it is, or to maybe even run one day yourself. So we had pictures of King and Kennedy in our homes, and not to mention campaign buttons going back for a few generations. So that's probably the primary reason why and my dad was also a trial attorney, so I thought I could be a great virtuoso, jury trial person. I was headed there, but then I took a detour back to public service. And no, Destiny, I have not made a lot of money, but I can't imagine a better way to have spent my life. I was able to help 71 million people a day by turning around the Social Security Administration in a very tough time in that agency's history at the president's request, and then to be able to do things across the scale of a whole state. And then, but first, probably nothing was quite as satisfying as being able to serve people as mayor of Baltimore. So that's my backstory.
Can I ask, I'm curious, it seems like you were really successful in jumping from smaller offices to larger offices, and you were able to take some of the ideas or programs, I think city stat to state stat, right? You were able
Which
to take
we
those
took from New York.
Comstat. You were able to take these smaller programs and continue to up them to the next level. And it seems like sometimes people have trouble jumping into the larger pond. When you're going into the larger lake or the ocean or whatever, right? When you're going from one level to the next, I'm curious, personally, what were some of the issues, or what do you feel like was some of the biggest challenges? Larger offices, more phone calls to make. How difficult was it to go from being mayor to governor, or city councilman to mayor, or
Yeah, I wrote a book about this. It's called Smarter Government, and I made 16 cents an hour writing it. But it was the book I wanted to write. It didn't land me on Oprah, but it did land in a lot of offices of mayors and governors and county executive practitioners. So I learned from a super kind of genius savant guy. I'm not myself a composer. I'm a folk singer, but I recognize a good chorus when I hear it, and a replicable 3-chord song when I hear it. So this guy's name was Jack Maple. He was a lieutenant in the subway police, and when Bill Bratton became commissioner of New York, he gave him the biggest elevation in the history of American policing, from being a subway lieutenant to being the deputy commissioner for tactics and strategies for the NYPD. And they started making use of commonplace technology that my adult children think has been here forever, namely geographic information systems and the ability of, computers to crunch data on a massive scale, unintimidated by that scale, and to do it in a timely way so that you can identify on a map where the problems are. You can deploy the solutions, tactics, and strategies, and get inside, if you will, the turning radius of the problem instead of like chasing after it. So that is basically what CompStat was about. We were the first city to take it enterprise-wide, called it City Stat, first city to put 311 on the front end of it. And the 4 principles are the same, and the most important thing about it is also the same at every level. The principles are timely, accurate information shared by all. Because in the information age, with such a diminished trust in public institutions all around the world, you have to be open and transparent and share your data with all if you have any hope of establishing the trust necessary to deliver results or to move a big organization. Second, effective tactics and strategies, rapid deployment of resources. Third, relentless follow-up. So that also became the mantra for state stat, and that was the mantra for security stat for the recent, I think, pretty stunning turnaround by the hardworking men and women, greatly understaffed at Social Security. The good news about each of those leaps is that it's all human beings. And human nature doesn't change.
Okay.
And one of the things Jack Maple taught me that a lot of people in public service have a hard time believing, accepting, doing is, if you want to make 1% progress a year across in most of our governments, we're set up to do that 1% a year. It's called the budget. But if you want to make progress every 2 weeks, 1%, then you've got to convene people with openness and transparency, give them permission to ask questions and come up with solutions so that you're making 1% progress every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. We, as human beings, it's just the way we're wired. We imagine our work future in 2-week view sheds, and we remember our work commitments in 2-week hindsights. One of the operational differences I found, though, in going from direct service in the city of Baltimore to the state, where oftentimes, we made our public schools #1 public schools in America 5 years in a row. But there were 24 counties that had their own school boards and their own political authorities and their own superintendents. So we had to, at that level, and we repeated this recently at Social Security, you have to get people on board with a plan that is time-stamped. In other words, with deadlines and also assigning responsibilities for what might be attenuated links in the chain of delivery. And by that, I mean you want to fill a pothole, somebody calls for a pothole, the dispatcher dispatches a crew, you fill the pothole. That's 3 links. But if you're talking about improving 3rd and 4th grade boys and girls reading scores across an entire state with different socioeconomic, neighborhoods, it's the child, it's the parent, maybe it's a grandparent, maybe it's the foster parent, it is the teacher, it is that instructional leader in the school, might be the principal, might be the vice principal, the instructional leader in the county, or if it's a big county, it might be the area first. And you can imagine how that chain emanates all the way up to the governor eventually. So that's why the plan's so important. And then there's other intervening externalities that come into it, like the health and well-being of the child. How many kids come to school and all they can think about is having their next meal because the last one they had was at lunch the day before? So we were successful at every level. Thank you for seeing that, because one of the things that has so many of us checking out of democracy, checking out of politics, is our belief that it's too big to be managed. It can't be managed. We're no longer capable as a people of delivering the goods of the republic that make a republic worth having. But my experience has been the opposite. I think we've never had better tools. What we need is a new way of governing.
I felt that a lot towards the end of COVID, when I felt like the leadership wasn't the greatest, and it felt like we were kind of in disarray. But as soon as America got its act together, that when we're all single-minded and moving in a different direction, or in a certain direction, that things like the personal protective equipment, things like the vaccine rollout, that if our mind is set to a particular task, that we absolutely do have the tools to get things done. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, it's remarkable, isn't it, when you think back in history in World War II, how quickly we ramped up as a nation when we had that threat. We tend as human beings to get our shit in one sock when there's a enemy at the door or an emergency, and then we go back to the way we've always done
Fighting
things.
amongst ourselves sometimes, yeah. One of the things that I struggle with personally is narrativization. So having like a broad story for like moving people in a certain direction.
Yeah, all the world is story.
Yeah.
You can't move people with data.
Yeah, unfortunately.
They move by story.
And I look, when I'm kind of like looking at you, I see parallels. Hopefully there's no bad blood between you two, but you and Pete Buttigieg, and that like.
No, I know him very well.
Yeah.
Actually, I've known him. I've known him for a long time.
Okay, good. Sorry, in the streamer world where I'm at, sometimes people are always randomly fighting with each other, and I don't always keep track of it. But regardless,
no, I like him.
Pete
We're
is
friends.
he comes off as a very data-driven.
In fact, I supported him for DNC chair when he ran.
Yeah, okay. Very data-driven, very process-oriented guy. And I appreciate that. Do you feel like sometimes, whether it's in the party, in the media, in the culture, that there's a little bit of people view that as kind of an elitist thing, or they look down upon it, or they don't view it as favorably as people who are more willing to just kind of like tell broad stories? Or do you not get that feeling? Or from my perspective, I feel like sometimes one of the big criticisms of Pete was that he came off as like an elitist. From my corner of the media, that was a common criticism levied at him. But I love like all the stuff he's done, going on to conservative media and fighting, and then all of his very like detail-oriented stuff.
Yeah, it's. I had to learn that as excited as I got about the how-to of delivering better results, whether it was, in the school system or, working or reversing a 300-year decline in the health of the waters of the Chesapeake Bay. I could talk to you for an hour about how we did that and about the 34 performance metrics. But, that's not the same as the story that says, when I was out on the Choptank River, I talked to a guy who'd been fishing the Choptank his whole life. And I asked him, how's the river doing? And he said, better. And I said, how much better? He said, not as good as when I was a boy, but I actually saw a sturgeon the other day, and people thought they were extinct. And I'm seeing some of the bay grasses coming back now ever since they fixed that sewage treatment plant up the river. That's a story, So, and what we need to do a better job of, I think, as a party, is boiling down our stories into the structure of and, but, and so. Little Red Riding Hood went through the woods, and she was hoping to get to her grandmother's, but there was a wolf blocking her path. So she dropped her bag and ran like hell to grandma's, and but so. We have struggled to do that because we are a party that actually believes in government, and if you listen to some of the language of our candidates, they have an over-reliance of the word and if we can just stuff your ear and with one more fact and after about the first 5 ands, it becomes blah blah blah. So we need to get sharper in our communications. I had to learn to do that every time I ran for office and was reelected. People care about stories. They care about their neighborhood. They care about people like them and people that they know. They don't care so much about the performance metrics or the feedback loops or GIS. People that need to get it done do, but not so much the people who are in charge, which are the citizens. So we need, just as you'd have to explain to your boss in ways that your boss appreciates how you're doing what you're doing with a limited time that any boss has to focus on it, the people are in charge, the citizens of the republic, and we need to do a better job of giving them executive briefings, not, numbing their brain with data after data after data.
It's interesting you say that because one of the biggest struggles, I think, in coming into this election season and then seeing Donald Trump win is before we had this fixation on, or at least people talk a lot about, you yourself talk about like tabletop issues, right?
Kitchen table
issues.
Kitchen table.
And
actually, I wasn't allowed to talk about it during the campaign. I was hatched. But
oh, sure.
Afterwards.
But I feel like one thing that seems to be happening, you bring up communication, is sometimes it's not so much these issues. It's can people have visibility on what has been done about the issues. And it's weird to me that it seems so difficult for the Democratic Party to take credit for any of the successes, and the Republicans can take credit for things that they haven't even done. Like to see Donald Trump, who came into office trying to destroy the ACA, all of a sudden champion pre-existing conditions, or to see Democrats struggle to, I'm sure you have a lot of criticisms for Hillary in 2016, but she tried
Not
that.
so much. I was a surrogate for her in 30 states.
Sure.
I have a lot of respect for her, but we clearly, as a party,
Yeah.
failed to connect and failed to connect with the kitchen tables with most Americans.
I remember her statement was like, it was the America's already great versus make America great again. Maybe her problem was it wasn't the and but so story, because it was just kind of stopping there. It seems like today Democrats have a really hard time communicating successes or wins. I'm curious from your perspective, what are big things that the Democratic Party can do to communicate like some of the good that the Democratic Party stands for and has done and will deliver for the American people?
Yeah, that's a question every single member of the DNC that I have spoken to is asking. And by the way, fair attribution, it was my friend Joe Rome. He wrote a book, and one of the chapters in it looked at Secretary Clinton's language in the debates and compared it to Donald Trump. And what he found was an over-reliance of the conjunction and in her language. And a diabolical balance of and but and so from Donald Trump. So part of the answer to this, how do we reconnect? How do we re-engage with the concerns of the hardest working people in America? And by that, I mean the people who are busting their ass just to keep their nose above water. And that's who felt like we lost sight of them, so they lost their loyalty to us and hit the refresh button, even though they knew that meant electing a really horrible person to the White House again. So that's a stunning defeat. That tells us that for all our well-intended policies, we did not communicate to people sufficiently the story of how we were making things better. When I ran for re-election as governor of Maryland, and one of the things that distinguishes me in this DNC race is I'm the only person that's actually run for office, served in public office, been re-elected. Coming out of the recession, my own media consultants told me, don't try to talk to people about the economy. They're not feeling it. Nobody's doing better than they were before the recession. And we said, well, that's not what we need to convince them of. We need to convince them that after they voted for us, we took actions to make it better, to tackle the problem, that we're coming out of the recession faster than other states. And we failed to do that when we had the power of the White House. Other historians will unpack what the many reasons for that might have been, but we failed to make those connections back. We did a better job of that. Remember the shovel-ready days of the early Obama administration when we wanted projects all over the United States that were shovel-ready so they could be good to go. And people said, oh, well, they're small projects. Well, they might have been small projects, but they told a story.
And they were visible.
They were visible, and they were in what Eleanor Roosevelt called in a different context, the small places close to home, so people could see. So then as they were recovering, as we were recovering as a country, it was not such a big leap to convince folks that President Obama had done a good job in that first term. I got in trouble on one of the shows. I was a fairly visible surrogate for him at that time because I was chair of the Democratic Governors Association. And I was asked by a reporter on a talking head show, are we better off than we were 4 years ago? The classic famous Ronald Reagan slang line that he used on Jimmy Carter, now blessed memory. And I said no, and they clipped it at no. But the rest of my sentence was, but we're doing better than we otherwise would be had it not been for these actions that President Obama had taken. It's tricky. It's not easy to punch that in 20 seconds, and maybe some of the longer format, media that we now have as we recovered from COVID will allow a greater degree of discussion in the new public squares about how our government actually how our government actually works and the choices we make and the impact it has on the future we share.
One of the big complaints I've had from a data perspective is there's a lot of statistical things that are not immediately intuitive. And the problem that you just described there is a big one, that if a thing goes up, it's good. And if it goes down, it's bad. But people don't think that, like, well, it went up, but it could have went up a lot more, or it went down, but it could have went down a lot more. People tend to associate like a plus or negative as just being good or bad. And it's hard to compare the otherwise alternative. Yeah.
And if Superman saves Metropolis from the meteor, most people in Metropolis don't know.
Sure.
Because they never felt the impact. Yeah, context is always a challenge. You have to be open and transparent about the data, but you had better tell the story underneath that data, that chart, that graph, whatever it is, that gives people the context to understand. It gives them the context.
Yeah.
Period.
What do you envision as being the character of the Democratic Party? Because I feel like we're a little bit lost right now. When I think of the Republicans, I think of MAGA, and that implies a whole cultural thing behind it. It's like a whole movement. And then when I think of the Democratic Party, for a while there was like AOC and the Justice Dems, and then you had Obama obviously before that. But like over the past 8 years, I feel like the party itself has been a little bit. Are we in debate mode now?
No. I'm just leaning forward.
No, you're good. Yeah, I feel like what do you envision as, like, if you could kind of set from the DNC chair down, or if you could kind of direct or dictate, not like in an orderly, like I'm telling you to do this, but like what should the character of the Democratic Party look like, do you think, going forward?
Yeah, the Democratic Party right now, from the phone calls I've been making to a lot of members of the DNC, there's some pretty common themes that come through, regardless of what part of the nation, I'm speaking to a person from. Almost everybody agrees that the hardest working people in their states felt like we didn't care about them and that we weren't speaking to their concerns, that they're very anxious, fearful about what tomorrow will bring for them and their families. And Donald Trump give the devil his due. He is a master practitioner, has a twisted talent for the politics of fear. The other thing that a lot of people in the DNC say is that nobody seemed to listen to them throughout the campaign. And what happens in the center of that circle, we should not be surprised then if the effect of it further out, when it's reaching people at their own kitchen tables, is that we're not listening to them. So the character of the Democratic Party, as a collaborative servant leader, a proven turnaround leader, the first thing we need to do is bring people together to listen to one another, to learn what we have to learn from this colossal second failure, and to make the changes, tactical, strategic, that we must in order to meet people where they're at, including in communities online. One senior Democrat said to me, "Hey, I'm all for ground game. We had great ground game. We were knocking on millions of doors with tens of thousands of volunteers for the last 3 weeks. But while we were knocking on doors with stone tablets, the other guys have been inside those doors for a year, communicating on this channel, that channel." And they weren't cable channels, where people actually get their news or, log on for whatever the lifestyle thing is, whether it's weightlifting or cooking or whatever the hell it is. So we need to. That's a technical challenge for us. But it has big strategic implications. So we need to make the changes we must to win. And one of those changes is we need to up our game when it comes to digital communications. Create, if you will, to serve the entire ecosystem of people that run for state, local, national office, a center of excellence at the DNC for digital communications, so that people when they're running for office, don't have to do so much guesswork as to how to reach the right segments of a community. And each segment's important. It's part of the whole. Nature achieves stability through diversity. Ideologues believe the opposite. So we should embrace that diversity of our party, of our electorate, and we have to meet people where they're at. And for however badly we missed the mark when it came to coordinating, or rather communicating back to the homes of hardworking Americans what we were doing when we had the power in the White House, we now need to be very good about communicating back to people who Donald Trump is actually for and who his decisions hurt, because it will be a lot of working people, a lot of our humblest people, people who depend entirely on Social Security or who had in the past had to always choose between their prescription drugs and their food. We need to draw that line right back, and we need to do it over a much broader variety of channels than one cable news network or two.
Yeah. I will say from the little bit that we worked with campaigns to do, I mobilized my community to do a lot of door knocking and canvassing, that it was surprising to me.
And thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you for this interview. It was surprising to me how much it felt like every time a new electoral season was upon us, that everything was being reinvented from the ground up. Like, I had this feeling that coming into a campaign, there was like, here's all the established infrastructure. These are the people to do this. Like, here we get all this information from here and here and here. And there was just like a process, like a blueprint ready to go. And it felt like, at least for a lot of the campaigns that we were working with or alongside, that there was a lot of this kind of like, I don't know if I'd say guesswork or kind of like reinventing the wheel every single time. And it's like, how do we not know, like how to get minivan out to everybody, or which doors were, or what, like, that was very shocking and surprising to me. Just in terms of what you talk about, like for communication within the party.
Yeah. Every campaign technology doesn't stand still. The dynamics of a democracy do not stand still. Communication technologies don't stand still. And any of us that have studied the history of campaigns knows that there's always a little bit of a arms race, technology race to figure out what is the next most effective way to get to people in a persuasive way to persuade them to vote for you, and to test those messages. And it seems from talking to a lot of people, and keep in mind, for the last 2 years, I was hatched once the president asked me to go to Social Security. But from talking to a lot of people, it would seem that we were figuring out ways to get inside people's homes during the pandemic when we couldn't knock on the doors.
Yeah.
But while the other guys continue to hone those skills, develop those skills, even take advantage of AI and other ways to test message, the language and the phrases, it seemed we reverted back to our pre-pandemic behavior of just get everybody out 4 weeks before, knock on a lot of doors, turn out the base, and they were much more surgical, much more effective, much more strategic. So we need to up our game on that. And the biggest change we need to make is a return to our true selves of being the party for economic security for all Americans, to be the party that believes and acts according to the truth that our economy is not money, it's people, it's all of our people.
How do you have, on a personal level, that conversation with a person who maybe has never even opened YouTube before, that maybe some of these podcasts are important, or maybe this media environment is like worth taking a look at, when a lot of people that are party people that's just outside of like the stuff that they ordinarily engage with, whether generationally or what?
Yeah, sometimes when I think about the job ahead of us, I see like a big floor of cables that haven't been connected and plugged together with each other. And one of those big sources of energy and know-how is younger people in our party who really don't feel encouraged to step up and to participate and aren't given opportunities and circles to participate. I think we have to give credit that the Republican Party does a better job than we do of late in lifting up younger talent, people that have grown up learning how to get their news from other sources, that curate their own social media and pattern it to their interests and their time. So I think a part of this is actually bringing new people up and into the party. I've been very blessed by a number of people that have come to my aid in this campaign who have these chops, including Pete Buttigieg's former data guy. So the talent is out there, but as a party, we tend not to operate with a high degree of openness, transparency, and we tend not to walk the walk, with some exceptions. I was with Jamie Raskin the other day. We were talking about Democracy Summer. But with our party tends not to operate with the degree of openness and transparency that invites inclusion, especially across the generations, instead of just among senior folks in our federal government, House and Senate.
Do you think there are big lessons that can be learned from the RNC and how they operate?
Absolutely.
What do you think if there are a couple of things that you could lift the template and apply them to the DNC and then to the Democratic Party? What do you think those would be?
Well, we talked about one of them, which is that they're far more effective than we are at communicating online as a party, as a party than their candidate. There are some exceptions to that. Some of our candidates, I mean, you saw how Hakeem Jeffries, how close he drew his House members and the number of seats that we flipped there. And they were talking about the economic concerns. That's the through line for the candidates that won, including the 4 U.S. Senate candidates in states where Trump carried the day, and yet our Democratic senators also won. And I do believe that a big part of that is they were more effective from the macro messaging side of speaking to economic concerns, always prescription drugs, Social Security, high cost of living, affordable housing, and they were also better at communicating online. So this should not be some mystery under a dark tarp. There is a science to marketing analysis. There is a science to message delivery in the age of where people are all online. And there are techniques. We used to have an expression over the 1,211 field offices at Social Security, where I was honored to lead this last year, that if we're all doing it our own way, we're not all doing it the best way, to your point of recreating the wheel.
When you think about the media landscape that exists now, how worried are you about things like the platform X being controlled by Elon Musk and his relationship with the president-elect Donald Trump?
Yeah, deeply concerned.
Are these things that people ask me this question a lot, like what should happen or what should you do? And it's hard to think of a law. It's hard to think of a culture thing that would change it. It seems like outwardly on its face, it seems a bit preposterous that somebody so close to the president could also be in control of such a large media platform. And then obviously the messaging on X looks so crazy, to say it politely. Yeah. Are these things that you think are like jobs for like lawmakers to deal with, or is this a culture thing we need to fight against in the U.S. or what? Yeah.
Yes, all of the above. You know, I was listening to you a little bit back in the green room when you were talking earlier, and you said, I really want to ask somebody who's seen the ebbs and flows of our republic and elections.
Oh, yeah. Is it as bad now? That was going to be my next question. Yeah. Has it changed a lot? Yeah.
Yeah, you were going to ask, you phrased it a different way. Like, did you say, is this the most fucked up you've ever seen it?
That might have been the way I said it. Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Or were there other times that seemed equally fucked up? No, this is the most fucked up we've ever seen it. What we have now is something, what we're going to experience for the next 2 years is something less than a republic, sadly. In other words, doctrines that used to maintain order in the and some rules in the public square, like the fairness doctrine, equal time in elections, all of that went out the window a long time ago in, real life terms, 20 years ago. And now what's ushered in is, something less than a republic. Is it an oligarchy? Is it, it is not, it's not a country where rule of law is terribly respected.
You mean the country that elected the 34 felon yeah.
Right.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, it's republics, healthy republics do not, maybe I should use the adjective healthy. The healthy republics do not re-elect somebody that gathered a violent mob to disrupt an election. That's not how a republic operates. The Washington Post was prevented by one of the wealthiest people in America from even issuing an editorial. And that's the nation's newspaper. That's not how a republic operates. So we're in a very different space than we've ever been in as a nation. Precedents, what's the precedence for this? Perhaps the Civil War, but there were geographic and other dynamics there. These are differences of opinion that are even within our own families. And yes, we've been through times of political polarization before, but this is very different with algorithms pushing messages, with AI pushing messages, and with the amount of disinformation and misinformation that is now in the public square. And promoted oftentimes in big broadcast by Fox. And there is nothing on the Democratic side that's the equivalent of Fox. And you saw, how MSNBC's ratings tanked immediately after the election. So this is, to answer your other question, we've never seen anything like this. Now, we can't change yesterday, though. We can only change tomorrow. And that's why I'm running to be chair of the DNC, the greatest pro-democracy platform still left in the United States of America. And together we're going to have to figure this out in order to have a republic on the other side of these 2 years.
If I could ask, and I don't know, this maybe is a little bit more on the federal side and not necessarily a DNC chair thing, but why do you think it is that Republicans seem to be able to infinitely escape accountability for every single thing they do? Why is it that so one of the things that Donald Trump is so critical today is of our relationship with Mexico and the trade that goes on there and needing to tariff whatever. If that was Kamala Harris's renegotiated NAFTA, right? If that would have been her U.S.-Mexico-Canada free trade agreement, he would be talking about it endlessly. But nobody talks about the fact that Donald Trump is expressing all of this discontent with a trade agreement that he negotiated, or whether it's all of the scandals, whether it's the ethics investigation for Gates, whether it's the there's a million examples, everything related to J6. So there's a million things. How is it that it seemed the fact that they couldn't in the House hold on to their speaker position when they had a majority in the House, I think for the first time in all of U.S. history. How is it that, and I'm not saying that we should emulate this, how do we also not take accountability for anything, but how do you force accountability onto them when there is failures in governance, when there are outright lies being told by the administration, when they are dismantling or undermining parts of, essential parts of our country? What do? We, the media, we, the party, you as the DNC chairhead. How do you fight against that?
We have to become a lot better at rapid response and immediate communications. We tend, because we're Democrats, we value consensus, we value differences of opinions, and that means that we oftentimes miss a news cycle, and we sometimes allow, a difference between a camel and a horse is. A camel is a horse made by committee. Okay. So we tend to craft messages that are overly complex and do not immediately go to the point. We need to have a 24/7 campaign. We need to have rapid response. We need to communicate in stories. We need to communicate. We need to meet people where they're at online, and we need to do a better job of recruiting a hell of a lot more influencers, I would say, as the other people have. I'm not saying that we whistle in Russian allies, but I am saying that we need to do a better job of lifting up voices in our party that can help with that rapid response. We talked a little earlier about how we can get our stuff in one sock when there's a challenge at the door, a pandemic, or an enemy at the gate. Shit in one sock was mine. That's a Maryland term, and so maybe that's a moment right now. Maybe I do believe that our party has the ability to be a lot more focused in our message and to communicate back to the reality of hardest working Americans the bad things that Donald Trump's going to be doing, whether it's tariffs that drive up the price of things, or whether it's a wink and a nod to drug manufacturers to start raising prices again. We need to hit them. We need to hit them hard. We need to hit them immediately whenever it undermines the economic security of the American people.
Do you? Okay. I'll have a DNC question. I'm so curious on the governance part. One of the big criticisms.
Like talking about government.
Sure, yeah. One of the big criticisms that has been given to the Democrats is their refusal to play dirty. And personally, I think that when both sides get dirty enough, you've lost whatever system it is you're trying to defend. However, there is an undeniable surge in unethical, improper behavior that has served great political ends to the Republican Party.
Oh, yeah.
Whether
Trump
it's
is the poster child for it.
Well, Trump is, but it's Trump is like the end of like a line of, and I'm sure even before I can remember, whether it's the Ken Starr fishing expedition for Clinton, whether it's the election from
one
Gore.
of those lawyers now on the Supreme Court.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Whether it's Gore having that election taken from him, whether it's the presidential immunity that the criminal immunity that the president has now as a result of a Supreme Court that is due in part to the fact that Obama had the longest vacated seat in all of Supreme Court history because the Republicans decided not to have a hearing on it. What do you think is the appropriate response? Say theoretically, Democratic majority, Sotomayor retires or is gone or whatever, right? Do the Democrats say, no, actually, we're not going to have a hearing for a Supreme Court justice. We are going to get you back on this? Because I feel like there's been this unending cycle of the Republicans doing something that I would say is abhorrent, to be nice, and then the Democrats saying, like, okay, well, we need to come together and be a democracy again. And every time the Republicans are in the back foot, they're like, we agree, that's good. And then when they have the advantage again, they're like, okay, now we're going to do whatever we can to investigate, prosecute, do whatever to you. What is the breaking of that cycle? Do the Democrats need to play a little bit more like Republican hardball, or is this like a communication message to the American people? How do you view that?
Yeah, I don't believe that we need to play dirty. I don't believe that we should play dirty, but I do believe that we should be ruthless in doing the things that we must do to win the next elections, which means punching back quickly, punching back hard, and giving no quarter when the Republicans who now control every branch of our government do things that harm Americans, that undermine the principles of our republic and the belief that I do believe all Americans still share in the dignity of every person and the common good that we share. So I do believe that we have in the past sometimes been too patient with obstruction. And Jefferson himself said, and I guess you would call me an institutionalist. Yes, I believe in the republic. I believe in the institutions of the republic. But there are some things that no longer serve us, and we should revisit those things. You've heard this debate about, the filibuster, and, serves us when we're in the minority, doesn't serve us so well when we're in the majority, or whether we should grant statehood to the District of Columbia or Puerto Rico. There's every generation has to retool and reform its institutions in order to serve the dynamic needs of a changing democracy. But back to the original call of your question, I don't believe we should play dirty. I do believe we should be ruthless. And if the law allows us, for example, to coordinate to a much higher degree than we currently do, just by merit of tradition or practice between different committees, federal and the like, we should do that. And if we have opportunities to actually bring in more influencers that can help us deliver the message, I don't think we should throw up our hands and say, when we know the other guys are doing that, that we're not doing it on our side, because we just don't do that, because that offends our notion of what a free press should be. Free press, my ass. They didn't let the Washington Post issue an editorial. They control the algorithms for X. So we need to be ruthless. This is not a time for the faint of heart. And in this election for DNC chair, most of the people that have a vote, the 440, realize this is not a time for a caretaker chair. This is time for a change maker. This is time to do a checkup from the neck up about the tactics and strategies that we've failed to use in order to deliver our message so that people know we're fighting for their concerns.
Do you think that the party is ready, not necessarily the voters, but that the party is ready to get behind a DNC chair leader and move in an aggressive direction? Or do you think there would still be a lot of second guessing, or is there a lot of the party that's like, well, we want to try things the old way again, or we want to stick with this? Like, how do you view the movement or the energy inside the party right now for a new direction?
Yeah, I think the party is moving. I think the party's after everybody got over their initial, grief, anger, denial of those first couple weeks. They're not all over it. I do believe that the party is rapidly moving in a position of saying, while this is an unprecedented time, there have been times when we've looked outside of the established, I've known them forever type of people in the party, and instead brought in somebody to effectuate change. The last time we did this was probably Howard Dean and the 50-state strategy, which we now call the 57-state and territory strategy. And in my read of history and talking to other people who have been in the DNC for a while, when these moments arrive, the DNC rarely goes with the traditional, I've known him since fifth grade sort of choice. We look for a person of some proven abilities and stature and that can effectuate change. And that's what we need to do. I don't think there's many people, I don't know. There are some people in the party who would say it wasn't so bad. I only lost my state by a point. But it was a stunning defeat for our nation. And we're the National Democratic Party. And so I believe that DNC members are moving pretty quickly in their there's a lot of people, the phrase du jour, or phrase of the month, has been, well, I want to hold my powder dry until I see who the candidates are.
Sure.
And so people are shopping, people are evaluating, but the word I hear is, and all the time in these questions, when I get people on the phone, usually the first question to me is, what are the changes you'd make?
Yeah.
That's not the mood of an electorate that thinks things are honky-dory and we need to vote for somebody we've known for 10 years or whatever it is.
Makes sense, yeah. On that, we only lost by 1 point. It was funny because prior to the election, one of the things that I was thinking and I would say is that, like, obviously it would be good if we won, however many swing states to win, or if we win all the swing states, that's fine. But I would always say, truly, the position is, in my mind, given the factual record of both of these people, anything less than like a Reagan tier sweep, in my opinion, is incredibly disappointing. Like, even if we win the election with all 7 swing states, something has been fundamentally broken that it would even be in the same ballpark given the record of I'm trying to be very fair. I'm sorry, I don't need to be because you're a Democrat. I don't have to worry about this. Yeah, the absolutely insane record and everything that's happened under this administration, right, and just all of the craziness.
Apathetic.
Yeah.
Yeah. The where do we go with that? My oldest daughter said to me, "Dad, people can blame the Democratic Party all they like, but this is also a democracy problem." I'm not sure our electorate in modern times has ever been so effectively misinformed.
Yeah. And I think nobody wants to talk about it, but I think the foreign actors have a decent influence, a large influence, maybe
Absolutely.
one might say. I think that the disinformation, one of the frustrating things for me as an internet debater guy who's arguing with people, is every single time somebody opens up with how important free speech is, it is always a person who is just using it to lie. It's very frustrating and it's very sad and upsetting that a lot of these arguments are being used for people that are just intentionally propagating, and it'll be like the same 3 or 4 just fake talking points, 40,000, and you can even ask people. Somebody will say 40,000 murderers are in the United States illegally, and you ask, well, how do you know they're murderers if they came across the border and nobody tracked them? And they're just like, it's just all these ridiculous lies that Trump repeats over and over again, and there's no checking on any of it, and the fact checkers are all biased and liberal, they say, and the center left media won't even hold any of these people accountable. And it's very frustrating.
It puts an enormous burden on our candidates to be able to respond to that much misinformation, because you almost have to pluck them. You remember the old game shows where they'd lock a person in a booth, turn on the fan, machine, and they'd see how they pluck as many dollars as they can. So when you're a candidate, you have to be very discerning and also very fast to say, that one I've got to respond to. And I've got to carve off some money from my positive message in order to come back at them on that. But we've rarely been so misinformed. I'll give you one near and dear to my heart. I was spending a fair amount of time. I always spent time as the Commissioner of Social Security, President Biden's commissioner, out in the country, because it's the largest domestic program in the United States. And yes, we did security stats, so every 2 weeks, doubleheaders, Mondays and Tuesdays at headquarters, but then I was off into the country. And I was visiting Pennsylvania and visiting a lot of some field offices in the central part of Pennsylvania. And our employees behind the glass would show me the mailers they were receiving in the, in the course of the campaign. In fact, some people in the waiting rooms had them with them and showed them to me. And it was, the statement was, this woman, a picture of Kamala Harris, wants to tax your Social Security benefits and allow illegal immigrants to bankrupt the Social Security Trust Fund. Now, the truth of the matter is, illegal immigrants, so-called, are not able to earn any benefits from Social Security. They never touch the trust fund except to put $22 billion into it that they'll never see a penny of later. And I was hearing from other entities that were polling on the attitudes of people to the basic question of who do you trust most to protect Social Security, that no Republican in modern times ever drew that margin so narrow as to be virtually tied with us in Pennsylvania and Michigan on the question of who do you trust more on Social Security. And yet, we were not responding to that at all. So we've got to get better at the rapid response. We've got to get better at calling out the misinformation. And we have to get better at recruiting good people who live in the United States if the other guys are going to be looking the other way as Russians or Chinese or whoever come in to tilt their scale and what people perceive. What is the new public square, which is online. And it's really hard to look people in the eyes when they're online.
Gotcha. Is 1 o'clock hour out? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. I don't think I have an out. I think the trains, I never chase after trains because there's always another one.
I'm not sure if we're supposed to wrap soon, but I will ask you this.
I don't think we've talked enough about the DNC.
Yeah. I was going to say,
we're going.
We're good. We can always close the curtain.
We good?
Okay, so my audience is an audience that Democrats have not historically, I guess, over the past decade have kind of had a lot of trouble with. Okay, so younger guys, I'll just say younger guys. You're coming into the DNC. There are a few things that you want to do to get this part of the electorate that it seems like is kind of slipping away, even on the Latino side. Do you have a specific thing that you would gear the Democratic Party towards them that you would say this is why you should be invested in this, or this is why we can represent you better than the RNC can, or better than the Republican Party can, specifically when it comes to young men?
Yeah, let me say, whether you're a young man, young woman, whether you're white, black, brown, gay, straight, we all need to eat. And so our party's ability to give a message of economic hope, especially to a generation that's entering the workforce, many of whom are staring down the barrel of more debt than their parents or grandparents ever had when they started out in life. I believe that a big part of that messaging, of course, has to come from our candidates, but we have to find a way to make the Democratic Party a brand that people want to run on and want to run to, and not one that they want to run from. And a piece of that, I believe, is that message of opportunity and a belief that we can make tomorrow better than today. I mean, it is a stunning indictment of the fear and the hopelessness about the future that with unemployment so low, that white male suicides are so high in our country. I used to ask the question across when I was campaigning in Iowa and New Hampshire, I would say, raise your hand how many of you believe you've enjoyed a better quality of life than your parents or grandparents. Every hand goes up. And in Iowa, mostly white people, in New Hampshire. And then I'd ask the second question, how many of you believe your children and grandchildren will enjoy a better life? Hardly any hands, unless it was a more mixed group, then more, Latino and black people would raise their hands. So a part of this that we suffer from as a party is an ability to create a vision for the future that can bring people together and make them believe that tomorrow can be better. Well, I found out there, you wouldn't know this, but I was a surrogate for Hillary Clinton in 2016 across 30 states, and then continued to annoy my friends by begging for money for a leadership PAC called Win Back Your State. And I traveled mostly to so-called red states. In fact, was there for Michaela Cavanaugh in Omaha and other places. And I found when I was talking in JJ dinners, initially 90% of my talk, I fell into the same trap of getting distracted by just what a horrible human being and how outrageous the behaviors and language of Donald Trump were and are. And I found by the end of that, when I began my talks with, you and I live in a time of enormous opportunity, the dawn of a third American century, the fast acceleration into a third industrial revolution, and the dawning in the Western mind of a third ethic, the ethic of the earth, that our well-being depends on the well-being of the other living systems of this earth. I said, and the coming together of those three huge opportunities is enormous opportunities to create jobs, create wealth, create greater health and well-being. It's those messages that are going to make our party the party of economic security again. It's that hope in the future and tying the actions we take and the actions we fight against. And there's another big piece. We talk about the cables lying on the floor that need to be reconnected for the Democratic Party. We bemoan the lack of connection we have with people in their hometowns and their home places, and yet we never talk to our mayors or governors or county executives. And those are the men and women that can make our brand cool, that can make it real, that also have the ability to bring younger people into the party and for good purpose and good reason. I mentioned to you that I was talking to Jamie Raskin, congressman from our state. A few years ago, he started a thing called Democracy Summer. That's now gone kind of horizontal across the Democratic caucus, bringing younger people in, doing 8 weeks, a stipend, placing them in a campaign, taking advantage of their desires and their heart. One of the most stunning things about this election, troubling ones for me, is the numbers of young people that flaked away from our party. Because if you want to know where a nation's headed, you talk to our young people under 25. So I don't know exactly what the it is, but I do believe that we need to, I know that the economic security is the big part of it. It is the thing that most people in America now fear is that they're going to have less tomorrow than they have today.
Mm-hmm. Can I say one of the things you just said that I agree with wholeheartedly is I wish that Democrats would phrase things more positively and less like a thing that you kind of like begrudgingly have to endure. This comes up a lot when it comes time to
eat your spinach stuff.
Yeah, it's like I get into arguments a lot when people talk about like taxes. People say like, "Well, how much do you think the taxes should be?" And the response that I always give is the tax should be set at whatever is needed to fund with the programs that we feel are important to us. But people talk about taxes like it's a punishment that you're meant to endure, rather than I'm able to do what I'm doing and work the job that I'm working because of the security of everybody else in this country that's taken care of in large part because of their taxes, right? You can be very rich in some not as great places, and a lot of your money is going towards things like private security. So the government or individual citizen doesn't just come and rob you or take all your stuff. Or
Welcome to the Dominican Republic. Huh?
Yeah, there's a lot of there can be a lot of social chaos in those worlds.
And there is a lot more private policing in neighborhoods in America. No?
Sure. Yeah. Same thing with you mentioned the opportunity. Same thing with things like climate change. I grew up very conservative. My parents are very ride or die Trumples even today. I grew up very conservative, listening to all of the Rush Limbaughs and the Glenn Becks and everything, and they would talk about green programs or climate change so much as this is how the Democrats want to control your life.
Yeah.
This is what they want to do to take over, tell you what kind of car to drive or whatever else. And I think it might have been in the 2016 or it was 2020 primaries where I started to hear Democrats for a little bit talk about how let's not think about how we're going to like lock your life away,
or
but
make
more
you wear heavy sweaters.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But
like,
here.
How cool would it be if America was the country that was the leader in green energy, the leader in exporting things? Yeah.
And I ran for president for a brief minute. Sorry about that. I tried to save us. One of the biggest kaboom lines in standing up on stools across Iowa and other places is that climate change is the greatest economic opportunity to come to the United States in 100 years. And framing it that way, I mean, governors that are successful at this, that's how they frame it. We have to stop looking at climate change like as something that's happening to us instead as something that's happening for us. All human progress is born of adversity. And boy, we certainly have a moment for great progress now.
Yeah.
But it's really also about the cost. I mean, I was part of something when I was on the board of it was kind of a book, bit of a movement called Project Drawdown. What are the 100 most impactful things we can do with existing technology that actually draws more carbon out of the air than pumps into it? And oh, by the way, some of it's a lot cheaper than pumping it out of the ground or doing fracking. I mean, the fact that we can now, no state achieved a bigger reduction in its carbon footprint than the state of Maryland did. And those were policies, choices that we put into motion. And you can now build new solar. I think solar and wind more cheaply than you can build a new gas-fired, plant. So the market's moving in the right direction. It is you talk to people in Texas. Look at how much energy they have in West Texas. They don't mind paying less for energy, but in the past, we've tended not to talk about it in those terms. Again, why it's so important. In some of our states, not a winning issue for Democrats. It's an imperative issue for the planet and for the species, but not a winning issue in some states for a Democrat to be championing. In other states, it is. And so those stories that are compelling and make sense in a state context are why we need our mayors, why we need our governors, why we need our county executives. Some of the other candidates in this race have started to talk about we need a war room for the modern times, but none of them has stood up one like I have.
Sure.
And I see it very clearly, and I can see us within the first 30 days standing up such a room and using the convening authority of the chair of the DNC to bring in those stories, bring in the perspectives, bring in the enormous communication assets currently underutilized by the National Party that are our elected mayors, our elected council members, and our elected governors.
Do you, so I don't know how much teaching you would have done here, but I think you had like a guest professor role at Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, daisy changed for a little bit. I did Hopkins just for a brief minute there, the School of Business. I did Harvard and Boston College Law. That was a full-fledged credited course. I did Institute of Politics at Georgetown. I did a graduate course at Maryland. Then I came back. The most enjoyable one was 160 students at College Park. And it was out of that experience that I crystallized the learnings and the stories that are in my book, Smarter Government, How to Govern for Results in the Information Age.
Yeah, my question, I guess, and for those, do you feel like there's a fundamental difference in how young people view or are plugged into politics today than they would have been, I guess, like 30 or 40 years ago in earlier generations? Do you feel like there's a significant difference and that you would have to approach it differently as well? Or do you feel like young people are plugged in the same way they always have been? I guess I ask because social media, it feels like it's changed so much in that everybody has like a political opinion about every single topic today, even if you're a younger person. Yeah.
Bo Burnham, Inside Out. Did you ever see that?
A long time ago, but yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He said, "Is it a good idea?"
Yeah.
That every single second, we all express our opinion
that
about
a warehouse,
everything.
Yeah, a warehouse worker in Arkansas might have a strong opinion on Leah Thomas or Iman Khalif, the boxer in the Olympic. Yeah, and it's
Is it a good idea? I think there is no substitute for. People theorize about how we've come out of the pandemic and whether we found ways to be social that were a lot more virtual than face-to-face. When it comes to getting involved in politics, there really is no substitute, I don't believe, for the relationship that comes from being with and among others in a campaign. I still believe that campaigns are the primary way that and the best way for people to get involved in politics. There are probably others. People that have some demonstrated ability to use geographic information systems or better techniques for communicating can certainly probably get entry-level positions in local governments that then you can morph from that into other ways of being involved in politics, which is why, as a party, we need to do a much better job of bringing younger people in and creating those mentoring relationships, and it's not just one way. It's not just one way. We're talking about making sure that people who have been in politics a while can learn better ways to communicate and to be effective and to carry their message.
If there are people watching as we do these interviews and there are certain candidates that they feel are really effective or that they resonate a lot with their messages, I don't know who these 440 people you're talking about that vote for, the DNC chair, like how would they even make their voices known? Like what's their way to participate or engage in that process?
Yeah, well, you can amplify the messages that the candidates or the candidate that you like puts out. So that's one way to do it. My name's Martin O'Malley. I'm running for chair of the DNC. I'd like your support, and I hope you might amplify my messages on the platforms of your choice. There are 440 members. Each of those members has come to the DNC for accomplishments, relationships, and reasons of their own. Their own lifetime of involvement somehow in politics. But they also love their country and they want to do what's best for their country right now. And they all realize this is a very important election and an important vote. On the way in, I met some of your folks outside. I was on the phone on this very cold New York day with a DNC member from Texas and having a great conversation with her. She said that she had asked 5,000 people in her state what they're looking for, because it's the first time she's had an election like this for a new DNC chair as a member. She asked those 5,000 people what they were looking for because she wants to know. I mean, for all of the fear, for all the atomization, all of the disengagement in our country today, there is still a yearning to be a part of community and to be a part of something larger than ourselves, and to understand what other, good-hearted people want for their country and therefore right now what they're looking for in the next DNC chair. So be engaged. The best way right now is probably to be online or to go to one of the 4 forums that are coming up in the country. I'm sorry I'm not able to rattle them off. I think there's a forum every day that I'm attending.
Okay.
So that's I would say be engaged. And because it's a bit of a conclave, these 440 members, in a sense, they're also very engaged. I mean, I'm finding our stuff is being opened by like 80% of the DNC members we share it with. So people are focused. Nothing focuses the mind like your own execution. And we're all very concerned about where our country's headed.
Okay. I guess if final question then, pitch. You are chair of the DNC. I should know this, and I don't know this. How long is that a position held for?
It's a 4-year term.
It's a 4-year term. Okay. You are chair of the DNC. Your first 100 days, they would ask as president, your first 100 days as chair of the DNC, what would be the big changes that you would try to push as much as you could?
Oh, I was saving that one for the first forum.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, save it. Oh, wait. Well, give us one. Give us like your third or fourth change that you would make then, I guess.
Yeah, everybody wants to know the 100 days. Well, look, there's a couple of things that the new DNC chair will have to do right away. One is to confess that we failed to communicate with the economic concerns and anxieties of millions of Americans across the country. The second thing we'll have to do is bring people together in a regular, recurring cadence to listen to one another and to craft an action plan that restores our party's purpose in the eyes of Americans and also ups our ability to win the next election, well, with better communications and with direct registration of more Democratic voters and with fighting for voting rights in every single state. Those are we will put those actions in motion, and we'll do so as a party, as a national party, bringing everybody to the table, including county officials, those running for state legislative offices, county courthouses, and mayors and governors. So that's what we'll do. It's, an action plan really only has integrity and value if you engage people in its creation. So I've put out a platform, but it has been my experience as somebody that's proven his ability to turn things around as an operational leader that an action plan that gets done is one that people inform on the front end, not one that they're told to do on the back end. We got to get out of this mode of thinking about leaders sitting high atop some sort of triangle of command and control where things get done on the basis of because I told you to do it. And instead, we have to put that circle on its side. We have to bring people to the table, and we have to take the actions every 2 weeks that drive our party forward.
Martin O'Malley, I really appreciate the conversation.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming here, and good luck.
Thank you, Destiny.
Thank you. You can call me Steve, but
all right, Steven.
Steve, thank you so much. Yeah.